that the United States and Russia still have thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other on hair trigger alert, which seems totally insane at this point. We still have 15,700 nuclear weapons in the world, which, according to the estimates, that the recent studies show that even a very limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan, in which 100 nuclear weapons were used, would create a partial nuclear winter and result in the deaths of 2 billion people. And that's if 100 nuclear weapons were used. It's only a few hundred more that would actually create full-scale nuclear winter and potentially end all life on the planet. So what's going on now between the United States and Russia in terms of NATO expansion? When the United States agreed in 2000 when Russia agreed to let Germany unify in 2000, the United States promised that NATO would not expand one thumb's width to the east. And if you talk to Ambassador Jack Matlock, who was U.S. ambassador to Russia at the time, or other officials, they say, yes, the United States promised that NATO was never going to expand. But Gorbachev never got that in writing. That was a verbal commitment. And then the United States has expanded 12 countries to the east, right up to Russia's doorstep. George W. Bush said he wanted to expand Russia to Georgia and Ukraine, expand NATO to Georgia and Ukraine also. And that's part of what terrified Putin and the Russians. So when we look at what's happening now in Ukraine, one of the biggest factors we have to put into that equation is the expansion of NATO up to Russia's doorstep and how that looks to them. How would the United States feel if the Soviet Union had expanded into Mexico and Canada? And that's the way the Russians look at it. I'd never been to Russia until last September. Then I went there in September, and I went back in December, and I'm going back in another week. Again, I'm working with some Russian filmmakers on a documentary about the U.S.-Soviet World War II alliance. And I think it's essential that the U.S. and the Russians think about and look to easing these tensions and beginning to work together as we did in Iran, get the recent nuclear deal in Iran. And one of the things that, when I look at presidents I like, Franklin Roosevelt, John Kennedy, at least the last year of his presidency, what they had was the ability to see the world through the eyes of our adversaries, to say, well, how does the world look to the Soviet Union? How does the world look to the Chinese? And we haven't seen that in recent presidents. We haven't seen that in leaders. And that we have to begin to develop that capability, to say, not from the American standpoint, but from the standpoint of other nations, how does the world look, and what can we do to begin easing those tensions? And I wish that the Chinese leaders were doing a better job of that also, rather than the hardline stance that they're taking in much of the world, and often Putin too. But we need to begin tamping down some of these tensions and looking at our common problems, like environmental degradation, which is threatening all of us, or the nuclear threat, which is still as alive as it hasn't been, but it's something that's off the table right now in terms of people's consciousness.